berms. Our berm is larger, taller, and our buildings are substantially further away from adjoining residential uses. But we did adopt the landscape berm commitment, the agreement not to have any building over 55 feet in height. And then lastly, while this is, you all know and are very well aware that commitments in Zionsville are reduced to writing, and those commitments are recorded against the property, and they're enforceable by not just the town, but by adjoining property owners. They have a fee shifting mechanism in them so that if the party incurs fees enforcing those commitments, then the landowner has to be responsible for those fees. I mention that because it was a topic of considerable discussion during our neighborhood group meeting, because several of the neighbors are here tonight, and you'll hear their concerns about the proposal. And what I gleaned, being one of the overriding concerns relating to their proposal, was some of the development that had previously come through the town of Whitestown that had been approved, I think ostensibly with conditions or commitments, and either those commitments were not fully understood or not fully enforced, and that's contributed to some of their concerns about a new proposal, however meritorious it is, and we think this one's very meritorious, presenting more difficulties to them. And so one of the things that we wanted to assure them as part of our proposal this evening and going forward is that we would reduce these commitments in writing, that Zionsville does hold parties responsible for the commitments that they make, and that so if we make a proposal to have a 10-foot tall berm, then they can expect to see a 10-foot tall berm with the landscaping and with the privacy fence, just as we've proposed here tonight. My team is available to answer any questions you may have, and we'd respectfully request a favorable recommendation, and are happy to answer anything you have in your mind.
Okay, thank you. Is there any public comment on this matter? If so, please step forward, state your name and address.
My name is Craig Triscari, 3270 Paddock Road. We're Perry Township that has been incorporated by Zionsville. We still have a Lebanon address for that community. Part of Saratoga, the community housing, which was briefly described, about several dozen homes, brick homes ranging anywhere from 250,000 to 450,000, with about acre plots on those areas. I just want to briefly just address some of the things that were discussed by Mr. Price and the individuals, and I'm sure that they build the best mega warehouses in the country. There's no doubt in my mind that they do that. But it is literally right on top of residential homes. Industrial one with no buffer in that area. Everybody in that area is well watered, which in that side of the areas which Whitestown has come in and moved in, not at the behest of the community, and started putting up those mega warehouses on their area. Their wells are having some problems in those areas now. I also like to add that 5 years ago, when this area was starting to be developed, and actually let me go back 8 years ago, because I was here when Whitestown was talking to the community about developing that area and business areas. The community is not against building and developing those 73 acres in a responsible manner. Through business or other homes that they can put into that area. This particular company focuses on warehouse, and it's a 1 million square foot warehouse with about 90 bays that will be facing those residential homes, in some cases only 250 feet from the back of their doors. So you can imagine the stress of those families that are directly in line with that. The community at large, when Whitestown was developing that area, we told them not to develop the truck stop. It was part of the county plan that they would not develop a a truck stop in that area because the roads don't support it. Whitestown had broke free from that planning board, and within a month, they decided to build that. Within a year of them building that, after the community that's here now, told them that the roads didn't support it, 2 people were killed and 4 people were injured on that road, and then NDOT got involved in order to kind of clean up some of the mess that was caused in that area. The development has been ongoing for 8 years. There has been huge broken promises to that community for what they were supposed to put up in that community, and they have refused. Whitestown has refused to do that. As early as just this year, in your paper, in the Zionsville paper, our paper, they said that they were going to plant those trees that they promised, and it's another year without those being planted. The community in general is not in support of an industrial zone area in that area. We would like to have a buffer based off of what Whitestown put in that area. This is a Whitestown plan. This is not a Zionsville plan. This is a Whitestown's plan. And the community went over to Zionsville and supported Zionsville, both for their mayor, and we supported in our community 100% to go into Zionsville just to prevent this from occurring within our community. So we ask you that you deny this proposal for industrial, but we would be more than happy to look at other type of development in that area as long as it represents our values, the homes in that area, and the construction and the Zionsville plans. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Just, can I have a moment, please? Dr. Robinson, we took the Zionsville school thing first, and it was approved, so I just wanted to make you aware of that.
Sure, thank you so much.
Okay, all right. Just in case you don't want to hang around for the rest of it. So. All right, would you please go?
Hello, my name is Jill Bratton, and this is my husband, David. We live at 4090 Snafflebit Road in the addition that is directly behind or to the north of this development. I would echo what Mr. Triscari said. We are understanding of development. I would point out, as I read your zoning classifications, that there are 12 distinctions between agricultural and industrial I-1, which include general business, which include shops of some kind, which would add the buffer that maybe we're looking for in that area. There are 2 warehouses already there. They have gone in. A third is not conducive to more traffic. And let me bring that up also. The petitioners say that it's 500 feet from the building to the edge of our addition. That doesn't include the parking lot, obviously. Doesn't include the 94 bays that will have semi-trucks pulling into them. The 94 semi-trucks that will be sitting and idling in that parking lot, waiting to pull into those bays virtually 24 hours a day. So we ask, just respectfully, that we appreciate you hearing us tonight, and that we say no to this development, but certainly we are open, as Mr. Triscari said, to something else coming in that area. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Well, my name is David, 4090 Snafflebit Road. I guess what I'd like to talk about is the rural character of the area. The other side makes it sound like it's pretty much all industrial. We do have the Love's truck stop, the Dream Cycle's on the other side of the highway. We do have cement plant of sorts, and 2 warehouses just south of us. When I walk out of my house, I see those. They're finishing. One's been finished; it's empty. The other one they're finishing now. Like Mr. Triscari said, we have a nice neighborhood. It's kind of I'd call a hidden gem in what I like to think of now as Zionsville West. We're proud to be part of Zionsville. Yes, there's a water tower, but there again, I'm thinking about the character and the integrity of that area. Not only our properties, which are all an acre or more. But 400 South, those houses were all good neighbors. You know, we love being in the country. We like looking out our windows and seeing cornfields and the farmers. That's why we moved there. We're close to the highway. It's very convenient. It's very inhabitable for you know, someone you know, for building there. It certainly doesn't, in my opinion, doesn't need to be huge distribution centers. You know, I would like to, this is about the last chance that we have to as I said, just kind of, you know, keep the character of the nature, the farmland. You know, we still have a lot of grasses, pines, trees, you know, birds, squirrels. We have a lot of wildlife out there, coyotes. That's the way we like it. Once this, if this warehouse goes in, I can see it very easily just surrounding our property of homes with a wall of concrete distribution centers. So I don't know if any of you have been out in that area, but I think you'll see what I mean if you could, if you are familiar with it. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody else who'd like to speak on this matter? Mr. Price, would you like to comment on the comments they made?
I would. First of all, I want to thank Mr. Triscari and Mr. and Mrs. Brattain. We had a very good meeting with them about a week ago to discuss the proposal. And one of the things I think we'd like to take a look at is we think this does represent the best compromise. I mean, one of the things about the area is that it is not predominantly agricultural. It isn't even really predominantly any one thing. Zionsville's comprehensive plan doesn't call for it to be preserved as agricultural. In fact, it labels the area with hash marks as mixed use in the comprehensive land plan, and that was done prior to many of the changed conditions in the area. And those changed conditions are there physically today. One of the chief changed conditions is that immediately to the south of the property, you have a newly zoned industrial property with a significant industrial building located on it. Immediately north and east of the property, you've had the continued development of Whitestown Crossing. And those developments were themselves kind of the outgrowth of what is in the vicinity, which is characterized immediately immediately west of our proposal by the Ready Mix facility and the Love's truck stop. And so the issue is that there have been a number of changed conditions that have led to the highest and best use of this property being industrial in nature, with one caveat, with one very significant caveat, which is that the best proposal would incorporate a robust buffer. Right now, the Saratoga development does not benefit from a buffer either to the south or really to the east. The east, we can't do much about. That was something that was done as part of an approval of a location in Whitestown. There is a nice sized buffer. I don't think there's any question that it would benefit from landscaping, and that landscaping and the buffer together would do a great job of screening Saratoga from the development that's occurring to its east. What we have the benefit to do tonight, though, and as we go forward with this proposal, should it be approved, is to really do the right thing with regard to buffering to the north, which is a 10-foot tall buffer with landscaping. Actually, Mr. Batain was the individual who asked about the privacy fence that could be located on top of that mound. We're prepared to commit to that and agree to that this evening. And we think that combination of berming and buffering and and also laying out the development in such a way so that it's oriented south of the power lines is the best way of protecting their interests to the north. I would also add they are a hidden gem. The development, the neighborhood has done well. I looked at their assessed values and what they've been doing over the last couple of years, and they're on, looks like they took a little bit of a hit during the recession like many of us did. They've rebounded of late and are going up since 2016. It is a nice development in the sense that it has wide streets, it has curbs and gutter, not what you'd necessarily expect in its location, close to an interchange, and frankly, isolated from any other residential subdivision in the vicinity. I didn't measure miles, but it's miles, I think, to the nearest platted subdivision that's anywhere near Saratoga. We think the best way to protect that gem is by exactly this kind of a proposal with the buffering and the screening and the distance to that property line. And we'd be happy to answer any questions you have about the specifics of the proposal.
All right, thank you. Wayne, staff report, please.
Thank you. As
Sure, come on up. You gotta go, Mike.
There again, there's industrial starting to come into that area, but once you go west of Saratoga, west and just less than a mile south, there are hundreds, if not thousands, of acres of farmland. So this is not something that we're just trying to keep out. These folks, it is farmland except for that area that you have there in front of you that you're talking about. When you're talking about buffering, we had a very amicable meeting last Monday, I'll say, and yes, I did mention, bring up the fence, but as far as buffering, there's no amount of buffering that is going to eliminate the noise, the light, the sight. There are a lot better things that can go in that area besides the distribution center. Thank you.
All right, thank you. All right, Wayne, staff report. Is there anybody else who'd want to comment? Okay, being none, Wayne, staff report, please.
Thank you. As indicated in state code and as outlined in your staff report, the Plan Commission's obligation is to be mindful of the comprehensive plan as well as the other items as identified in state law. We talk about the comprehensive plan, the current conditions and character, the most desirable use for which the area is contained, conservation of property values, and responsible growth and development. Those are the features that are captured in your staff report specific to your findings, if you will. With that, staff has reviewed the petition and provides a positive recommendation for your consideration this evening related to the request. The area itself, as it's mentioned, the town's adopted comprehensive plan recommends mixed use. We also offer the Whitestown comprehensive plan for reference purposes, just giving a different illustration of the land use pattern as it's being articulated in that particular area. Both of those plans are absent any information beyond the boundary of the western portion of this site. So staff would not anticipate any, it would be a conversation for a different day about rezoning changes beyond the property boundary of 300 East or anything in that area. The preponderance of staff support, much like for the Becknow petition, was specific to the buffering that's proposed, the land use pattern that's established in the area, and the alternatives that could potentially occur. For example, you know, a multifamily residential development, which is supported by the Whitestown Comprehensive Plan, potentially could request to put a building, a rezoning to that classification could maybe seek to put a building to the north of the property line, or the north of the power lines. With that development pattern, it is radically different than the proposal that's in front of you this evening, and that is the crux of the staff's support of this petition. Again, staff is in support and provides a recommendation to you. The one item that is not mentioned in this dialogue yet this evening is the Smith Cemetery. Staff is, you know, concerned about the accessibility of that area, and certainly would appreciate any additional dialogue that can be provided. We do have on record a traffic impact study that has been reviewed by the town engineer. We do note that the roadways in this area are under the jurisdiction of the state of Indiana or the town of Whitestown, but by ordinance, this project does trigger the requirements for the submittal of a traffic impact study. Again, staff is supportive of the petition as it's been filed, subject to the substantial compliance with the site plan and the commitments as presented, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
All right, thank you, Wayne. At this point in time, I'll open it up to any of the planning commissioners for comment, questions.
Mr. President, I have two questions. Mr. Price, first, could you point out on the map where the Smith Cemetery is? Where it's located? And then second question would be, Monsters mentioned a 250-foot buffer. Thank you. Perfect, thank you. In your diagram, you have 557 feet from building to property line. Is that consistent throughout the property, throughout the building? Or there was a mention of a 250-foot difference. If you could address that, that'd be great.
Ross can maybe speak to this better. It is generally consistent. It is not exactly 557 feet along the entire length that abuts the residential, but I don't, do you know what it is at the shortest and
Can you please state your name?
sorry, I'm Rafe Webster. I'm with Van Trust Real Estate, 775 Yard Street.
Ross Nixon with American Structure Point, 7260 Shadeland Station. It does vary a little bit there, but you can see on the site plan that it is relatively consistent and parallel to the property line. Exactly how much that varies, I couldn't say right here, but it's pretty consistent.
But it's safe to say it doesn't come within 250 feet.
Oh, sure, absolutely.
Thank you.
Within 250 feet, you can see that distance there is very
Thank you.
consistent.
I want to state that that's a lie, that it's not consistent. If I remember correctly, last time I looked at that,
You
need,
it was on an angle.
It's not time right now.
I guess my one question, as a distribution center, these things will run 24/7, correct?
Yes, some of them can, not all of them do, but oftentimes companies will have 3 shifts.
And so, Wayne, when we talk about mixed use, we're talking about kind of a multi-tenant commercial center, more of a Park 100 type thing, where you have users where, to me, a mixed-use building has, how do we define it, is more of a multi-tenant. Obviously, they've said they're going to have multi-tenant, but most likely they're going to have 2 or 3 tenants using several 100,000 square feet at a time versus multiple tenants using anywhere from 10 to 20,000 feet at a time. I guess my point of the question is, when I hear terms of a mixed-use commercial center, I'm thinking more private businesses that will run more office-type hours versus something like this, which will run 24/7. So not only do you have the truck traffic and the truck noise, but it will just be consistent. Is that correct? Am I far off in my assumptions?
Maybe a little bit. I think the commercial uses that are described in the comprehensive plan are more commercial, meaning retail. and highway commercial type uses is what's described, as opposed to something like a Park 100 per se. So what you see happening is this parcel right here is a commercial use. It's a highway commercial use that would ostensibly fit within the comprehensive plan, but it's a 24-hour gas station. And so what we understand the comprehensive plan to mean is other highway uses that may very well have the same 24-hour component, not unlike the Loves, not unlike the new gas station that's already been approved.
We're assuming the new building to the south of this, that's actually in Whitestown, will be the same operation, 24/7 distribution center.
Yes, I can't speak to if it's I believe it is a spec building. I don't know that they have a tenant yet, but
You have
certainly.
no idea what they're building next door to the building you want to build?
No, I certainly know it's a warehouse distribution center. I can't speak to the tenant or if they have a tenant in it. I believe it's a spec development. But yes, they could have a 24/7 operation in it as well.
Well, I was concerned about traffic, and when I looked through this, and I looked at the drawing, I thought you've addressed it reasonably well, as far as my opinion would be. The only thing, we got this extra, I got this before I came this evening, from the town engineer. Have they seen that?
Yes, the
Okay.
yeah, I mean, the
Yeah.
traffic,
So it talks about a few different applications of what you've already gotten out here, but you're already aware of that.
We are, and those looked fine with us. Those were consistent with what we envisioned as well for the area.
Because
Yeah.
it's different than what's,
It's a little bit.
different than what's in here.
Yeah, a little bit. So the, because of the development that's occurred already, this is anticipated to be a signaled intersection.
Right.
This one's right in, right out. And this would be stop signs. And so what the engineer for the town observed is that we may have to look at some turning lane links and things of that nature once we know precisely who the users are and are coming through a development plan.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure.
And that
because
makes
I
sense to
thought,
us.
Well, that's a little different than what's here. And so if I'm looking at this correctly, the truck traffic is not gonna go up on 400. It's gonna cut off at the road where that curve has been put in to try to eliminate the problems
That's
that
right.
we had back when that truck stop went in.
That's right. Actually, from folks heading south from 400, we actually think this development will be beneficial because it will complete those intersections
Right.
2 and 3, add turn lanes, and the signalization will occur as well. So you'd have those improvements to the transportation flow, even for folks heading south.
Because I know that's a concern, especially about some people that live a little further west.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
When I look at, satellite image of this, currently, there is really no berm, tree line, or anything that's really south of Saratoga in that property, it looks like.
There's not. There's
It's
not.
flat.
It's pretty flat. There are some trees, existing vegetation, but there's no question that a substantial berm like what we're proposing would be a very big change to the landscape there.
And on top of the 10-foot berm, what size trees were you planning on initially planting?
We would typically plant a 6-foot tall evergreen.
Is there any other questions, comments?
Well, I mean, it seems like the neighbor's main concern, beyond just changing the use from agricultural to industrial, that's been brought up as the noise. I mean, to what extent is there any ability to limit the timing or amount of noise that's generated if this change is made?
One of the features that we have added to the plan that was an addition as a result of the meeting with the Saratoga homeowners was the second berm. south of the pond. The idea was that that water feature could theoretically help carry noise from vehicles. And so the idea was to create a second berm that could help muffle that noise. So what we would have is a combination of just the sheer distance, then the taller, the initial berm, the pond, the taller berm, and then the landscaping as well to help muffle all of that noise. As far as operationally, I don't know if Rafe, if there's a way.
It would be extremely difficult to limit operations of potential users in the building, and that many of their whole business models based on operating 24/7, and they're obviously delivering goods to various locations. So I don't think that that's something that they could necessarily live with.
Well, and the fence that you're constructing, material-wise, does that do anything about muffling sound?
It could. What we considered was an actual privacy fence that could.
Just a regular wooden one?
It could be. It could be a barrier as opposed to a decorative fence. It could be a barrier so that could, in addition, create a block against any noise. And we could agree to that as an additional commitment as well.
Matt, you had one letter of support from the Padgetts.
Yeah.
Where's
Yes.
their parcel?
They are located immediately west.
On west.
So in other words, the proposed road extension could be extended on through to their property.
Theoretically could. I mean, I think Wayne touched upon that just a second ago in his staff report as far as be a question for another day.
So what we're going to end up with is an access road to this 1 million square foot building as well as the adjacent one behind it, traveling back and forth behind the Saratoga housing subdivision?
Well, no, I mean, that would be entirely within your control. Entirely within your control. The comprehensive plan, as Wayne mentioned, does not speak to lands that are not adjacent to the state highway.
And I realize this is Whitestown, but the two pieces of property east, I don't know if it's two, but the property east of Saratoga, it looks like half a farm field with some, either a farmstead or homes up in the front. And then there's a retention pond. Is that multiple pieces? Do you know if that's multiple pieces of property? Is that one?
It is, I believe those are, you're talking about the property that's kind of immediately south, if you will, of the water tower?
Yeah, it's in the corner of your property, yeah, up on there, yeah. It's, right,
So those are lots that are within the Whitestown Crossing commercial development.
okay. With this coming in, I mean, I'm trying to figure how they're gonna, I guess they'll access it, never mind, all right. Just trying to figure if that would kind of block their access, but no, it actually opens it up,
Done.
okay. Any other questions, comments? Being none, is there a motion?
Mr. President, I move that docket 2018-43-Z zone map change to rezone approximately 73.30 acres from the rural agricultural zoning district to rural I-1 light industrial zoning district receive a favorable recommendation based upon the findings in the staff report and the information we heard tonight, including the buffering and mounding accommodations.
Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor signify by aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed by nay.
Nay.
Motion carries 4-2. So, motion carries. We'll forward that for the recommendation to the favorable recommendation to the town council. Thank you. Next item on the docket is, I'll just list them both as the same. 2018-45 DP, State Bank of Liston, 8602 East 500 South, petition for development plan approval of an open space subdivision to provide for the development of 58.459 acre site into 78 lots for residential use in an RSF2 as per section 194.047E of the zoning ordinance. And 2018-44 PP, also State Bank of Lisbon, 8602 E 500 South, petition for primary plat approval in an open space subdivision provide for 78 lots in RSF2 residential single-family zoning district. Is the petitioner present?
Yes, Mr. President. If I can continue, for the record again, my name's Matt Price, attorney.
Mr. President, point of order under Robert's rules.
Okay.
You've called for the petitioner speaking. I did not hear any recusals of any of the 6 members that are here, and I believe that at least one member should recuse himself under this body's rules, 190.25I, for direct and/or indirect personal interest in this parcel. Specifically, your member, Mr. Reinbold, less than 6 months ago was interested in this parcel, was joined with Pulte, who's the petitioner, in a petition. Then after the petition was withdrawn by this body and before the plan, BZA made public comments about the neighbors who opposed the petition, indicating that the group of neighbors nearby, and I can quote it, I'll pull the IBJ article out, but I think it exposes and shows the personal interest that that individual has, and under the rules, we'd ask appropriately for the recusal of that individual on consideration of any petition with regard to this parcel, given the temporal nature of less than 6 months ago, along with the public comments that were made by that individual about people who made public remonstration, which is a right to be exercised in our nation, in this community. And for those reasons, we believe that before anything else goes forward, that we should have that entertained and heard by the commission. What?
Don't look at my notes.
No, I'm stealing that. And in fact, Matt made a good point, or not made a point. I would actually think that Pulte would join in this petition, given those things that have been pointed out under 190.25I.
All right, thank you. I'll ask our representation his thoughts on that.
Sure, I don't know the history that he's referring to. Really, the question at this point becomes whether you can be biased and impartial. And only the commission members can make that determination. If you feel that you can participate. If you can't be impartial, then you shouldn't participate.
I'll ask you, Mr. Reinbold.
Sure, and I'm happy to go on record and say that, yes, I can be impartial and unbiased to this report. According to our rules, I believe I comply and can sit for this petition. What we have before us is a separately filed petition that differs from anything that's been filed before previously.
All right. Would the petitioner have any comments on this?
I'll defer to legal counsel for the board. We certainly don't have any problem going forward like that.
Okay. Anybody else have any thoughts on the commission up here?
At this point in time, the individual said, I would like to supplement the public record with the public comments that were made to media about the remonstrators on the petition. I would also point out that in March, Mr. Price and Mr. Reinbold together came to my wife's and my home to talk about the petition on that parcel. I don't know I've been on this body. I recused myself from petitions when my law firm was doing things that I didn't even know about because I'm a litigator. I'm not a transactional person. Record's been stated. I just would like to make that known before anything else, and I'd like to supplement the record and get to the record all of those public statements that have been made about the various people that are going to be speaking today. I don't know how you can make statements about someone publicly and then come and say, I can be impartial. That, frankly, Mr. Chairman, is astounding.
Thinking about this.
I have a supplemental comment about how this is tied together. My name is Carolyn Schifferl, and the expenses that were incurred when Mr. Reinbold was involved with this property are attached to this project. I have been told that by the petitioner, that those expenses are still part of that. I was told by,
Not by me yet.
by the Pulte development, that those expenses are part of this project. It's all still tied together.
I'd be happy to help break this down for
right,
Mr. President.
I'll just say, Mr. President, I'll stand by my earlier statement that this is a separate, unique, distinct petition than what was filed previously.
All right, well, when I take a look at our rules, disqualification of Plan Commission member in case of personal or financial interest, our rules indicate that it's limited to an indirect personal or financial interest in any petition presented. Should disqualify himself under that situation. This is not that situation. And if Mr. Reinbold says he can be impartial, I will take his word for that. All right. Will the petitioner please proceed?
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. For the record, again, my name is Matt Price. I'm an attorney with Bingham Greenebaum Dahl here tonight on behalf of Pulte Homes. I've got representatives from Pulte with me this evening. Our president, Scott Mayer, sitting in the third row there. Our manager for land planning, Caitlin Dofer, sitting on the front row, who just handed out the packets. Then we have our engineer in the audience as well, Brandon Burke, who's with HWC. We've handed out a couple of layouts that show both the vicinity and the development pattern that predominates in the area. I'd like to give just a little bit of background relating to that. As we know, the property is at the southwest corner of Whitestown Road or County Road 500 and 875 East. The property was annexed into the town of Zionsville and rezoned back in 2008. It's undergone multiple different development proposals since that time, each of which have required some form of a variance. The original proposal that I am somewhat familiar with back in 2014 or so required variances for a residential development that consisted of this property and then the property at the northeast corner and the southeast corner, just a little under 210 total homes. And then the proposal that you heard earlier, that was rezoned earlier this year for the Little League facility, which also, as we know, required variances. At that time, I think what we heard, among other things, was that the objection was not so much with Little League as it was with combining the 78 homes into a smaller number of acres, and if that a proposal came forward that met the terms of the ordinance and did not require any variances, that would be acceptable to the surrounding property owners. Now, a proposal that does not require variances under Zionsville's zoning ordinance is a very high bar. And we feel like we've met that bar here this evening with this proposal, and I want to explain kind of some of the details relating to that. First of all, under the zoning classification for this property, which is RSF2, which is a residential zoning classification that predominates throughout the town of Zionsville, there are 78 total lots that are permitted on the property. And that's the total number of lots that we seek to have platted and approved as part of a development plan this evening. Now, we've sought to pursue this development through the open space rules. And what the open space rules allow a petitioner to craft is a proposal where the lot sizes can be shrunken down, but in exchange for the shrinking of the lot sizes, there needs to be an equivalent, at least an equivalent creation of open space. And we've done that here and have created a proposal that is just a little over 42% total open space. All of that open space is accessible to residents of the development, which we're calling Ashburn. It's all accessible by foot traffic, for example, both in terms of the surrounding perimeter pathways and also accessible internally through the development as well. In order to create a project that fits in well with the surrounding land uses, one of the things that Zionsville requires only for open space subdivisions is that wherever you have a home site that backs up to a perimeter roadway, you need to have a 150-foot buffer. And if you think about, as you drive through Zionsville and you look for developments that abut to a perimeter roadway or where they back up to a perimeter roadway, and you think about how many of those developments have a 150-foot buffer, it's really hard to think of one, frankly. You can drive all over Zionsville and you may not see one. One that you may see is the Rockbridge development that backs up to County Road 400, where there's a substantial greenway from the county road or the former county road to the first residential homes that are built north of that road. We've taken that same concept here and applied for robust buffering along the perimeter roads, both along Whitestown Road to the north, 875 to the east, and then County Road 550 to the south as well, so that all the homes are well removed from adjoining land uses on the north, east, and south. Now, along the west, we've got a couple of adjoining property owners that we've also incorporated buffering along that western property line. Again, seeking no variances. We have an approximately 27-foot buffer along that western property line. And then we've added certain features to the layout to recognize Mr. and Mrs. Schifferl's home and barn, where immediately to our west, we have eliminated any lots that line up to any structure on their property. So in addition to the buffering, we've eliminated any home sites that would abut any improvement that they have on their property. And so you see the common areas on the western perimeter of the property as well. We're also incorporating a berm along the western perimeter as shown in the kind of the dark area though that shows a raise in elevation. That's what we think makes the site particularly appropriate for this location, makes it fit in well. The additional buffering along 875 allows for a nice transition from the larger lot home sites immediately east and northeast, while preserving a very nice buffer to the west. We're not seeking any waiver requests as well. So when I say variances, we're not seeking any development standards variances that would require us to go to the Board of Zoning Appeals, but we're also not seeking any waivers. So unlike virtually every subdivision plat that you may see come through here, we're not seeking any waivers for street tangent lines, for the location of driveways, for anything related to the development of the parcel. We believe that we worked very closely with staff at arriving at a land use plan that accomplishes the goals of the open space subdivision ordinance in Zionsville. I think if you compare it to the surrounding land uses, and in particular cobblestone to the northeast, and you see the use of curvilinear streets, you see the use of buffering, the creation of attractive open space, that it's very consistent with the developments that have also taken advantage of the open space subdivision regime and arrived at very attractive projects. With one caveat, which is that this goes above and beyond even what you see at Cobblestone. If you drive further north on 875 as you're heading towards Pearson Ford and you look to your right, there are several home sites in there that abut 875 and do not have the 150-foot perimeter road buffer. I don't know exactly why that is. It could be that standard was added later or that variances were sought, but we're not seeking those variances and going with a very robust buffering package that makes this project fit in well with its surrounding environment and provide the appropriate transition. In reviewing the staff reports, we believe we meet each and every one of the criteria for plat approval and for development plan approval. We appreciate the time that staff has taken with us to work through this proposal and its various aspects. And we appreciate your approval here this evening and would be available to answer any questions that you have. Thank you.
All right, thank you. At this time, I'll ask for public comment. If you
For the record, Kevin Schifferl, 8552 East 550 South. We are, my wife and I, the immediately west adjoining property to this development. I want to first start off by, quoting A Tale of Two Cities. It was the best of times, it was the worst of times, it was the age of wisdom, it was the age of foolishness. We certainly have a lot of wisdom in this room. I would say that in some issues we have a fair amount of foolishness as well. But before I make additional comments on that, I want to thank Scott Marin from Pulte. While unlike some of the other groups that presented today where they met with the neighbors, on this proposal we were not afforded that opportunity. However, Scott, you went out of your way, you were polite, pleasant, dealt with my wife on every one of her questions, even if it's an answer we did not want to hear. And we thank you for that very much. It's appreciated. And I want to thank Pulte as well for, as Matt just showed you, they actually, I think, I know, they moved a lot at our request from near our barn. There's still a few issues. I will generally say, I want to make sure we're clear on this, that I'm glad to see the 78 homes on a parcel as opposed to 78 homes in 40 acres. I think that's appropriate. I also want to say that we had asked, well, does it have to be 78 homes? Because the right is to have 78 homes here. That's the maximum allowed, and that's what the petition's for. I dare say I think that this proposal would be even sounder and better with the removal of another home site or two, and specifically wanted to address that. And the response we got from Scott was, no, I need 78 homes. I can't move any other ones, but I'd ask that it be considered that the present home site 63 be considered for removal. That happens to be right next to our horse pad, which leads me to one of the issues that we raised with staff. On 10/4, October 4, we came and met with staff because one of the things that exists in the Zionsville plan is that before someone petitions, and this is important, before someone petitions for an open space subdivision, it's supposed to be submitted to building commissioner review, and the building commissioner is supposed to, and I'll quote, the building commissioner shall provide his or her findings in writing to the petitioner with a copy forwarded to the plan commission. The petitioner may then proceed to file this. In this case, that we don't believe was done. In fact, on August 6, a pre-filing meeting was held by Pulte in which some plans were brought in, and under the ordinance there are a number of things that the petitioner is supposed to, or the building commissioner, who is Mr. DeLong, is supposed to review and put in writing. And they are items B, 1 through H, dealing with comparing plans, noting efficient use of land, et cetera, in relationship to surrounding properties, and I quote, including the improvement of the view from and buildings. When we asked for that, at first, the staff told us there was no such thing. Then we got this single piece of paper, which I believe is in your record because that's what Mr. DeLong told us, and I hope you all have it. This consists of 6 lines, and if you don't have it, I'll make sure you get it, or I hope that Mr. DeLong will provide it to you all. But this is Mr. DeLong's findings under these things, and I would suggest to you that they are not findings. I do note that in the petition that was filed today, or in the comments from staff on the petition, that in here, Mr. DeLong has put down on page 3 of 6 under the development plan approval, building commissioner's findings, and he references that these relate back to October 6th, but I will tell you there was no such findings than when we as members of the public came in and asked for them, and that's important because one of the things we all hope as citizens is that procedures are followed and people are doing what they're tasked with doing, and that was not done here. And why is that important? Well, it's important because of the various things that are supposed to be observed by the building commissioner, including under the second part of this, after the other items B1 through H, where it says the building commissioner shall further review the proposed open space subdivision to ensure that it is constructed, arranged, and operated so as not to interfere with development and use of surrounding properties in accordance with the applicable residential district. My property, the Lions property to the west, is zoned R1. As a matter of right, we have the right to farm. And as Mr. DeLong told us, he recognizes that right. In our case, that means that we have an equine operation. Now, why is that important? Well, under an equine operation, if I want to, on my land, put a barn, I have to put my barn 100 feet or more from my house. This development from Pulte, even with the moved house, and again, we thank Mr. Marin for that, still has lot 63, which would be, you heard, 27 feet of setback from our horse land, which is inappropriate, we believe. It further goes on to say in this that one of the reasons for this pre-review is that the building commissioner, that would be Mr. DeLong, would have the opportunity to consult with the town engineer or other appropriate health and safety individuals to ensure that all fire and safety issues are addressed. This community has a safety officer, Boone County Public Health. That's why we have to put barns 100 feet from houses. Why would this board approve putting houses closer than I can put my own house to the barn where I keep my animals that do animal things? That is a health issue. Beyond the lack of findings, though, there's a couple other issues that are affected with regard to this development. And again, I think this can be solved, frankly, with removal, in our case, of one additional lot. But there's also the setback. One of the things that the comprehensive plan does state shall be attended to is appropriate buffering between different residential zones. This is not R2 up against R2. This is R2 up against R1. And one of the things that when I was a member of the 9-person body, when we were trying to homologate the rural rules with the local rules as part of the adoption of Eagle Union into Zionsville, was that we as a community said we're going to recognize the existing rural character of our area and put in appropriate buffering. And this body did this. This body did it back, frankly, when I was on this board, when in my very own neighborhood we approved the Pemberton subdivision, which allowed 60 feet of setback, not 27. And let's do the math on that. If you have 60 feet of setback and you have a building setback of another 15 feet or 25 feet, that gets you up near 85 or close to that same 100 that would be prohibited with regard to allowed for building of a barn near a home, and we think that that would be much more appropriate than 27 feet that's accounted for here. And the last thing on that issue is Mr. Price said that all of the open space area is accessible and is accessible by walking path. Well, he's generally true. Matt, you're generally right, but none of the, quote, open space, end quote, that they're accounting for, which is on the western perimeter of my land and the Lions' land, is accessible by anybody. Frankly, I'm sort of pointing this out, it's a good thing and a bad thing because I don't want it to be accessible by anybody, but you don't therefore get to count that as open space, which is why you don't get 78 home sites, you might get 75 or some number less than the 78. Those are the particulars on the project, but there are some additional issues. Note that in this petition, nowhere did you get anything submitted to you from the schools. Over 600 of our citizens commented with regard to the Little League project, and many of those comments had nothing to do with either the Little League, but they had to do with the residential development, growth in our community, and how does it affect our school. I would hope that minimally you would continue this petition today to require Pulte to come forward with a school study. You haven't heard price points of homes or anything of that sort, and that's important, and it's important to every single resident that lives here now, that supports our schools, that doesn't want to overcrowd our schools to create a problem for Dr. Robeson and others to deal with, which I know they will deal with it, they have to. They're here to serve the public. There's also some other unknowns. Look at the staff report with regard to the issue of drainage. And I know this is a particular concern of at least a few members who I've heard comment publicly on other petitions. The drainage report that's been submitted here states right in it that the mound behind lots 62 and 63 appears to be designed to direct runoff to run south of the property line near the south end of 62 where it was free to flow in the backyard swale. This would concentrate the off-site flow along the property line, including on the adjacent property. That's not me saying that. That's the town engineers, Beam, Long, and Neffs, saying that on October 12. You have it. Well, that's my property. That's not only my property, that is our horse pad. So this development, by what the town engineer found as deficiencies, these are items that do not appear to be consistent with the town's requirements, would put that drainage on my property where my horses are, where their feces is, where their other things are, totally inappropriate. But it's not just that. There is no drainage yet tied up here. There's a plan for drainage. They want to get an off-site easement, which I don't believe, unless Mr. Price tells us to the contrary, they've yet to tie down. Why are we putting that cart in front of the horse until that is tied up? And please, look at this drainage report. These are items that our town engineer talked about with regard to drainage that do not meet the town standards. There's also an additional issue on this petition, again, unrelated to the number of homes or the layout, and that has to do with the wastewater. In this case, well before this petition was filed, a number of us had been asking our wastewater superintendent, what is the plan? Just like we have a comprehensive plan, you may or may not know, our town has a sewer plan for development. And we've looked at that. It was approved. Nowhere did this hookup that they're proposing here lay out in this sewage plan. And in fact, let's talk about what they're proposing. Wastewater Department, you have this in your materials, 8-6 of 18. Our superintendent, Barry Cook, puts in here that what's going to be done for Pulte, a private development worth billions of dollars, is our town is going to spend our taxpayer dollars, not taxpayer dollars, ratepayer dollars, public money, to run a sewer hookup from the Cobblestone Lakes area down to this area. But that doesn't solve all the problems because it says right here, the sewer to the north does not have adequate capacity for the entire development. So this would be a temporary, not planned for, on the town's nickel run of this. And it says right here, the 8-foot gravity to the north will be installed by the town, at which point Pulte will reimburse the town for a future date to be determined. I sat on this body and I sat on the Boone County Plan Commission. I've got to tell you folks, I've not yet seen where a town supports residential development by a private billion-dollar company and then bills them afterwards. In other words, every other person that lives here now is going to be fronting this money as opposed to Pulte putting this money out. And I noticed our mayor was here before, so maybe this is a new policy on which his administration is going to run, that we're going to support residential development by helping pay for it. That's the foolishness of which I quoted earlier from the book. But it gets worse, because not only is this a temporary hookup from the north to the south that's being proposed under the wastewater plan, but then this plan is going to be phased in, phase 1 and phase 2. And the southern portion, they say, is going to require to have a lift station. Okay, let's put a lift station in. What's the long-range plan of this community that's been set forth and it's in writing? All of us can go to the wastewater department to look at it. Did it ever have a lift station on this property before August 6th of 2018? Do you want to guess what the answer is? No. So the question is, for our mayor and perhaps others, why are we publicly supporting with dollars from our town a private developer to be able to develop this? Capitalism is appropriate. If you want to develop the land, put your capital into it and get the capital out of it, but don't do it on the backs of the ratepayers and taxpayers of our town. That lift station is being proposed for the corner right opposite, I believe, the Schmidt's house. Again, we all know what, we like to think we know what the rules are, which is the comprehensive plan, the wastewater plan, and believe you me, we look at those things ahead of time. This was never envisioned in any of those things. So why are we doing this for this private developer, which, as it says here, the reimbursement for this expense to the town will be determined at a later date? Why do we have that unknown? If Pulte wants to develop this land, and it's certainly something that's anticipated that this will be developed, why are we not getting to know how much is being expended, how much is being carried? Do I get that deal? Will the town run a sewer to my house that I can pay the town back over time on? I think a lot of us would like to have that. We don't get that. So why are we giving it to an out-of-town billion-dollar corporation? That's another unknown. So I've hit the schools, I've talked about drainage, I've talked about sewer, and I talked about the issue of accessibility. I believe all of those are important reasons why this petition, if the determination is to be heard today, should be denied. But more importantly, let's defer this so we get answers to those questions. I want to make sure I'm very clear on this. I personally, I can't speak for all my neighbors, am not here, nor have I ever been here saying, don't develop that land. It will get developed. We know that. But let's develop it the right way, where the private developer bears those costs. It's almost ironic that in a conservative community, with all these Republicans running around here, that we have people willing to just let our developers do this on the back of the ratepayers and taxpayers. It's got to stop. We have plenty of other developments right now with plenty of other lots that are being built on, and until we get answers to these questions, at a minimum, I think this needs to be delayed and deferred. One last thing. This development has nowhere in any pack did we see anything about what the back of these homes will look like. Now, why is that important? 41 of the 78 lots proposed presently, 41 will be outward facing. The streets, my lots, the Schmidt's lots, the Lyons, the Peters lots. We're looking at people's backyards. Aren't we entitled to know what those will look like? It has been told to us verbally that there will be no vinyl. There's nothing in writing there. I believe some others will talk about and hit the issue of the commitments. But this is important to us, and it's important that we do it right, because to my knowledge, this is the first subdivision being proposed since the merger where we're dealing with RSF2 up against R1, and we need to make sure we get it done right.
All right, thank you. Is there any other comments? If you do speak, I would appreciate it if you didn't repeat
Exactly.
things that have already been stated. Thank you.
I'm Carolyn Schifferl. I reside at 8552 East 550 South in Zionsville, and I am also the adjacent to the southwest portion of the property. I'm looking at my list. He hit a lot of those things. My one thing that we haven't discussed here, I discussed it with Pulte, but I don't see anything committed, so I want to make it on public record, is covenants for the neighborhood. I was given some template of covenants. They were not providing any kind of uniformity. As my husband mentioned, more than half of the homes, the backyards are facing out, and they're facing our property. We would like to make sure that there's a commitment for uniform fencing, that we're not going to have 8, 9, 10 different homes with privacy fences and of all different materials. We've stated that Cobblestone Lakes has a wrought iron type of fence. I didn't mean exactly every fence is actually wrought iron. I understand there's different materials that are used to appear that way. So in appearance, they are uniform. Simple things like that make a huge impact on the way the neighborhood looks for all of us that live there. And I'm asking that you keep consistent on what you're requiring for the look and the feel of the neighborhood. If it's important in one area of Zionsville that something fits in with the surrounding areas, make sure that whatever development is approved, it fits with the feel of this neighborhood. We happen to be rural on 3 sides of this, and on the 4th side, it's farmed ag land, which is also RSF2. But realistically, you're a pocket of RSF2. Make a fit and feel of a neighborhood work. They've worked hard with us, so continue that and be consistent. And make sure that my property values aren't decreased because of the drainage problems, et cetera, that having these backs of houses. This room is bigger than 27 feet, by the way. So the back of that wall to where you are affords you more space than I'm going to have between my property and the back of a very tall home. So imagine that. Make some rulings on what it's going to look like and how it's going to feel. You can do that. And I beg you to please do that for our community. And I agree with all the other points that he said, even though I didn't repeat them.
Thank you. Any other comments?
Good evening. My name is Tom Thompson. I live at 8855 Stonewick Way. Excuse me, Cobblestone Lakes. I wanted to piggyback on Kevin's comments on the water and sewer, if I could, since I live in Cobblestone Lakes. On the HOA meeting of April 14th, 2017, American Water Works came out and addressed a water pressure issue that we've been dealing with for several years. Approximately 10% of the residents in Cobblestone Lakes have water pressure issues. What that means is being able to run multi-showers or water-intensive appliances, such as showers and dishwashers or irrigation at the same time. The pressure, water pressure at Cobblestone Lakes, as they measured, is 45 to 55 PSI. American Water Works defines ideal pressure as 60 to 80. With that being said, their summary of their findings is Cobblestone Lakes is far away from a pump station and at a relatively high elevation, both in which impact the average water pressure. So my assumption with the new subdivision being proposed is we're a little bit higher than what they are, and with them hooking into the water and sewer in Cobblestone Lakes, will that in effect exacerbate our issues that we've been dealing with for a couple years? So I'd like for the town or this commission to look into this to see if it will not continue to cause any more problems in our subdivision. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Is there any other comments?
Hello, my name is Tom Peters. I live at 8437 East 500 South
in the Brock's Meadow neighborhood, which is a little bit west, not immediately adjacent, but we also own the farmland directly north of 500 South. And I agree with the comments of my other neighbors. I just want to briefly touch on the exciting topic of drainage again. Since we own the farmland to the north, if any of you have actually looked at the property where the Little League proposal headquarters was supposed to be, there's almost always standing water there. There's almost always a little patch of standing water on our property to the north. That's because the tiling that was put in, God knows how long ago, and a culvert brings water, stormwater underneath from the north end of this property to our property, and then it's supposed to run off underneath 875 East, but with, I'm not sure why it doesn't drain that well. I know there's been utility work, other building at Cobblestone Lakes, but we always have some standing water. So my concern is, and I know there's a stormwater drainage report, but frankly, I'm not smart enough to understand all the numbers and abbreviations on there. But I would just like some reasonable assurance that this, that this project is not going to worsen our drainage problem that we have. Your engineer is here, I think, or if someone could comment on that, and if you all could take that into consideration before making a decision. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Is there anybody else who'd like to make a comment?
Hi, Christine Schmidt, 8680 East 550 South. My property is on the south side of the proposed subdivision. All the concerns that the Shifrels brought up, obviously we have concerns as well. A couple things that if, you know, we knew the development was going to be developed at some point. I guess, you know, I envisioned custom homes like Pemberbrook up on the northwest corner of our block, of our neighborhood, more like what we have as current homeowners surrounding that. It doesn't have to be 1 to 2 acres, but more custom homes that when I look north, I see complete farmland right now. It's going to be filled with homes, and I will have to look at the backs of those houses. And I sat here a couple months ago and heard someone talk to a farmer who wanted to put a farm stand on a parking lot. And we spent 20 minutes addressing what it would look like. Like, I'd have to look at that when I passed it. Well, when I look out my window and I see this subdivision, I have to look at it 24/7 for the rest of my life, hopefully, and my children's life. And what I'm asking is that we look at the back of these homes. What are they going to look like? Are people coming in and out of our community coming up 550 and 875? They will have to look at the backs of these homes, not as much as I will. So I just want to make sure that we address, if we go with the subdivision, what is it going to look like from the street? What do I have to look like? I'm a current resident in Zionsville, so I would like to have that addressed a little further. Also, I think in the landscape, it said they were going to put 5-foot trees on the back. I'm going to look at 5-foot trees for a pretty long time. So if we do this again, perhaps we could ask them to put trees that are more mature, that maybe will buffer and maybe put a berm that, again, facing the north, which is the south of their property. The only other thing I want to address, and someone else brought this up before, about we're all on well and septic. And, you know, we rely on, I would assume, the water flowing into the ground in order for us to get our well water. And when you put retention ponds into the north, I have no idea how to address this, but how is that going to affect our wells? Because again, we rely on the water that is currently coming from our agricultural neighbors. I'm a little concerned, and again, I don't know how to address that, and that made me think of it before. So again, development, I'm not opposed to it. My husband is not either. I just want this to be done right, the way that Zionsville would want it to look like. Doesn't have to be like my home or like anyone else's home, but let's just make sure we do it right and it doesn't, you know, really affect our values of our home and our community.
All right, thank you. Is there anybody else with comment?
Hi, I'm Vicki Westbrook, 8292 East 550 South, also just right down the street. One of my concerns, I agree with everything everyone said, but did we do a traffic study on this? Because I have to walk across the street to get to my mailbox, and already I have to wait and wait and wait for the traffic to die down just to get my mail. I don't know if a traffic study has been done yet. You know, when we're looking at the schools, can we also look at the traffic? I know that it looks like the entrance are on 875 and 500, luckily not 550. That might help cut down on some of it, but I thought that was kind of a precursor to, you know, everything that you do when you put a development in, you do a traffic study. And my question to Pulte, why not build less homes? Kind of like what everybody else is saying. It would be nice if you could just do a few, 20 less homes to make it a nicer neighborhood with bigger lot sizes. I think that would be a better transition from our 8 and 10 acre lots that's surrounding the whole development across 875, north on 500. I know that everybody talks about Cobblestone Lakes, but there are no big 10 acre and 8 acre lots surrounding Cobblestone Lakes, so that's really not a comparison of how they design that neighborhood compared to what this neighborhood's gonna be with the, neighbors. And we would have appreciated a neighborhood meeting. All the other petitions that were just heard had numerous meetings and lengthy meetings so that the neighbors knew exactly what was going to go in. I was never informed of any meeting. Maybe the Schifferls had 1 or 2 meetings, but I feel like we could have been more informed and kind of voiced our interest and our concerns and hopes for that property. Even though we know it's going to be developed, it would be great if it could, have a little more neighborhood input. So I did see, I know that was said that there was no vinyl. I looked through all the covenants that were on there. It does say there can be vinyl on these homes, so that is something that needs to be looked into as well. So because of these concerns, I would wish that could be continued so that we can get a little more input and information and things worked out before it's voted on. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Is there any other comments?
My name's Michael Lyons, and I live at 8541 East 500 South. As far as any contact, it's a little odd. I have 11 acres that adjoins this proposed development. I didn't, as just like you said, I didn't hear a word from anyone. And I do have a little bit of a concern. I've been at that property almost 6 years. I checked with the town, being R1, I talked to the police department, everything was fine. I've got a 12 to 15 foot berm and a shooting range that basically is adjacent there to lot 9 and 10. I'm pretty safe. I've never shot anybody. Don't plan on it. But I don't know that I'd want to be the guy that, was in lot 9 or 10. And so that's one of the things that's a little concerning to me. As far as the drainage. We have some real issues back there. I think you guys have probably covered that. What the fix is for that, I don't know, but there are some issues there that do need to be addressed or at least studied. So I do agree with what's been said. I do think that maybe we ought to table it till we can get some answers on some of that. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Is there any other public comment?
Good evening. My name is Michelle Bachmeyer. I live at 8850 East 575 South. our neighborhood, such as it is catty corner to the southeast corner of the proposed development. Currently, at least the southern half of that development drains those fields, goes under 875 South, and then pours through our backyards, one after another. Other fields also drain into that, both in front of us to the south and directly south of the proposed subdivision. Currently, when it rains, when we have a heavy rain, I get fast-moving water in my backyard that is 30 or more feet across. I have 4 children. I cannot let them in the backyard when it rains, immediately after it rains, sometimes a couple of days after it rains. I cannot mow in my backyard for an entire month in the summer. I want to make sure that any drainage issues are adequately addressed as we put in concrete driveways, as we put buildings in place of open field space, as we're covering up that dirt, that is less soil that can absorb that water, and that water winds up becoming more runoff than we had before. And I am concerned about the impact that that is going to have, the worsening of the drainage problem through the backs of our houses. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Is there any other comments?
Max Schmidt, 8680 East, 550 South. Just a couple things. One, there's going to be a pumping station in front of our home. We're immediately to the south of the development. If there could be some strong consideration of trying to shelter that, because it's going to be right in front of our property. And I would just like to echo that you know, the idea of custom homes on lots that are a little bit larger. I know that it was stated in former meetings that that really wasn't a very feasible plan in terms of financial, you know, being financially solvent for Pulte, but they certainly were willing to put lesser homes potentially in other developments that they've done. So I don't really understand the marketing analysis that went on there, but clearly, I mean, I believe our property values have gone up based on, you know, my knowledge of the surrounding homes. So I'm not really sure why it wouldn't work, and I'd encourage them to maybe rethink their plans. We want neighbors. My 12-year-old's totally pumped that there's a neighborhood going in because, you know, we're out in the sticks and she doesn't have anybody to play with. So, so we'd like it. I mean, it's just, you know, we just don't want a morass of homes, you know, and the feeling that we're up against a morass of homes. It's just, anyway, that's it. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Hey, Mr. Schmidt, real quick, are you on, do you face 875 or are you the first house on 550 South?
We're on 550. There's a corner lot. We're right next to the corner lot.
Okay.
So
Got
there's an, yeah, we're just west of the corner. So
Okay.
we're the.
So the lift station really isn't in front of your house, it's down at the corner.
Yeah, at the end of the driveway, perhaps. So I think there's got to be some of that area right at the corner there, Larry, that's going to have to be for that intersection. That's going to be part of the Cooper Road development. And the other thing would be to consider is how in the world are we going to get cars, you know, east on that 550 road to get onto that new Cooper Road extension? Right now, the proposal is there just going to be a stop sign there, which is just totally inadequate. All the buses go that way. You know, as one of the other neighbors said, there's a tremendous amount of traffic that goes down that road. We're going to have that. I'm not going to be able to get out of my driveway. So we're going to have something there eventually, you know, roundabout or something that's going to help with that. So I'm not sure how the pumping station is going to go right at the corner there away from our property. But I'll leave that up to the the planners, but it seems to me there's going to be a lot going on in that area right there.
All right, thank you. Is there any other comments? Would you like to address some of these, Matt?
Just kind of start from the beginning, and I'll work my way through. I made some detailed notes as we were going through the comments. Just right off, I'd like to address the question about procedure. We followed the procedure. We had a pre-submittal meeting. We submitted those plans. We received feedback on those plans, and that's what allowed us to file for this hearing tonight in September. I have seen the finding and believe that is entirely consistent with process in Zionsville. I might also add that that process, there are no time parameters relative to that, meaning that you can submit and then file once the finding has been made. So it does not contemplate public monitoring of the pre-submittal or any certain number of days between the time you submit and you file. The whole exercise that you go through really is to protect the town and to protect the petitioner from going forward and making plans only to find out later on that the town determines those plans don't comply with the open space ordinance. But once that determination has been made, you're free to file, town's protected, the petitioner's protected, but it doesn't contemplate public participation in that process. That has nothing to do with transparency. That's a town mechanism in working with the petitioner. So I wanted to address that at the outset. With regard to the open space, the density for this project is 78 lots an acre. That does not include any common area that's less than 50 feet wide. So that's by ordinance. So the area to the west that is buffer area does not constitute common area and was not calculated in our overall calculation to arrive at how much open space we had or to calculate how many lots we could have or the reduction in those lot sizes. In fact, we created that buffer area along the western perimeter in order to provide some screening along that perimeter. With regard to the covenants, I'm certainly open to more dialogue about the covenants. I can say, though, that we are prepared tonight to commit to no vinyl. That's never been an issue on a Pulte home, particularly a Pulte home in Zionsville. We're also perfectly prepared to commit to a uniform fencing, consistent with what's done in other neighborhoods that Pulte's developed here in Zionsville. So we can commit to both of those things. With regard to drainage, that's pretty obvious to even the most casual observer that there are drainage issues in this vicinity. It's also fairly clear that those drainage issues are exacerbated by the lack of infrastructure. This property is a receiving property, meaning that it receives water from a much broader watershed for which there is no infrastructure to collect that stormwater, to retain that stormwater, and to ultimately discharge that stormwater in any kind of an orderly or regulated fashion. And so what our drainage plan does, and which is absolutely clear under the town's review, is that it does improve the drainage by collecting that stormwater through the series of ponds that you see, by retaining that stormwater, and by slowing its discharge so that property owners adjoining to the east and south will experience a reduction in the amount of water that's entering their property. That's a very significant part of this proposal. That addition of infrastructure is going to go a long way towards improving existing conditions in the vicinity. I might also add, too, with regard to the comment that Mr. Schifferl made about the engineer's report, none of those take issue with the drainage plan itself. Though there are some clarifications that the town engineer has asked for as we go forward, there's very few of them, given the size of this development. And the one in particular that Mr. Schifferl mentioned has to do with just assuring that the berm that was installed for the benefit of Mr. Schifferl's property doesn't inhibit the flow of water from his property onto our property. That's what that comment is about. And so that's the only thing the engineer was noting with regard to that particular comment. So no good deed goes unpunished, perhaps, but we'll make sure that the berm created to add the screening doesn't prevent the flow of water from Mr. Schifferl's property onto this receiving piece of land. We'll talk a little bit about sewer as well. It's almost offensive, the line of argument that says that the town is somehow subsidizing or paying for the extension of sewer to this property. And that somehow is uncharted territory in our community, and that's somehow promoting residential development in a way that we've not done historically in Zionsville. And I say that because this property has been neglected with regard to sewer. It was annexed nearly 10 years ago. And there's a very clear law in Indiana that says that a municipality must extend sewer to property that's annexed within 3 years of the effective date of the annexation, on the same terms that it provides sewer to everybody else that's been annexed into the town of Zionsville. Now, the way Zionsville does that is that the developer pays for its pro rata share of the extension of the utilities. That is the only thing that we're doing here. So for the initial provision of the sewer, which is a part force main, part gravity line running sewage to the north, Pulte's paying for that. Not over time, not through a note, not through any financing device provided by the town of Zionsville. They're paying for it the same way every other home that's been annexed into Zionsville has paid for its sewer. So there's nothing being done on the backs of any ratepayers. To the contrary, because this property is located where it is, adjacent to 875E, which is going to be expanded into the new north-south connector, and because of anticipated future development in the vicinity, the developer is also being asked to contribute to a regional solution to sewer, not just the initial installation of sewer to the north, but to also subsidize the provision of sewer to an entire region. And it's agreeing to do that on a pro rata basis based on how many EDUs are attributable to its project. So there's no subsidy there at all. The sewer master plan was amended and updated. Originally, as part of the Little League proposal, was the triggering event, but it was long overdue, needing to be done. And to the town engineer's credit, they did a phenomenal job, updated that sewer master plan to encompass not just this area, but other broader areas in the community to assure that sewer could be provided to those properties in a manner that was fair to our existing ratepayers and fair to the properties that had been annexed into the town but not served. I'm not aware of another parcel in Zionsville that was annexed and not served sewer. If there is one, I don't know which one it is. The town expended a great deal of money, in fact, to extend sewer south down Zionsville Road and received stimulus funds to help accomplish that. So if there's ever been any subsidies, it hasn't been done under the current administration by any means, and that belongs to past councils who may have had a different view of how to pay for sewer. Our current administration, though, to remove any doubt, is the developer pays, period. And that's the way it's working here. With regard to the water provision, it's Citizens Water has been in close communication with us to assure that they have adequate pressure, both from a potable water standpoint and from the standpoint of providing fire protection. Pulte, in fact, to help, I think it's okay for me to say this about the memorandum of understanding, to assure that it's an unusual agreement is why I say that, in order to assure that the system-wide has adequate pressure, Citizens going to need to make some improvements to their system in this area and in other areas in the town of Zionsville. This isn't unique to this area of Zionsville. Pulte has, in the process of negotiating a memorandum of understanding with Citizens that would involve them donating land somewhere else, not connected to this particular parcel at all, but donating land so that Citizens can pay for those improvements here in exchange for land that can be used as a water tower elsewhere. So there's a financial arrangement, again, to solve the water pressure issues and to assure that there's adequate water serving this facility. And I'll just mention a couple other things just in passing. Certainly, I think property owners that, I think it's fair to say this, that an adjoining property owner that has an equine operation or a shooting range is responsible for operating its property in such a way that it does not infringe upon this development, and this development needs to be developed in a way that is respectful of what is going on adjoining properties. There is not, though, by virtue of having a horse barn, the right to essentially put an encumbrance on your adjoining property owner's land that says they can't build anything within 100 feet of your barn, which is largely necessitated here. If we're going to talk about geometry a little bit, the reason why that barn is right up against the property line is because there's a very narrow strip of land that constitutes the Schifferls lot that I believe required setback variances at the time it was built. They also required lot width to depth ratios at the time the property was platted, and those existing conditions certainly make it challenging to make a harmonious adjoining development, but we've gone to great strides to do that by creating the open space immediately adjacent where they have buildings and putting in the berm, which won't block any water. We'll make sure of that, and putting in plantings along that western berm to screen the property. And I would say the same about the gun range. I own guns and shoot guns. I have a good friend that has a gun range on his property, and have no problem with that, but you have to operate your gun range in a way that doesn't infringe upon your adjoiner. And I think that's clear to all of us. I'll close with just about the wells. There is, to my knowledge, there are no wells in this area, in Zionsville anyway, that are charged by rainwater, surface water, hitting the ground and then charging the well. Those are typically, those are tapped into an aquifer, and the aquifer is in the groundwater, and it's that groundwater that's the potable source of water if you're on a well. And so we don't anticipate any adverse impact on anyone's well. And in fact, with regard to water, we think that the overarching benefits here are that there's going to be infrastructure to collect that water and store it and prevent its kind of random discharge, which is what exists today. That's my list of items to respond to. Oh, there was the school. It's not aware of any platting or development plan that requires the submittal, or historically has involved the submittal of a fiscal study with regard to it. Pulte has a track record here, and they're building high-quality homes for which they've provided information concerning their elevations, including pictures of the rear elevations, I might add. They're not colored renderings, but there are drawings even in the staff report that show the rear elevations. Mr. DeLong mentioned in his staff report, he asked for, should this be approved, a commitment relative to the number of windows that we would have on side and rear facades. We are in total agreement with that commitment. We're also in commitment with the kind of the second portion of that motion, which has to do with addressing the engineer's technical comments as part of the secondary platting process, which that would be the ordinary practice for a development proposal like this.
There's a couple of the points that I heard. Let me just ask. I know you've done school impact studies for this one previously. There wasn't one included now. Somebody asked specifically about that.
I don't believe we've done a school impact study.
You did one for the, when it included the Little League.
No. We typically have not done school impact studies where there was no rezoning involved.
Right.
That's kind of the triggering event.
Okay. And then, can you comment on the traffic study?
We, again, the ordinance in Zionsville, the triggering event is 150 dwelling units for a subdivision. Because this is only 78, there's not a requirement for the traffic study. We did, though, take to heart comments that we received when the prior proposal was looked at, and we did eliminate the access point off of County Road 550. Thought that was an important change, and we've committed to the perimeter road improvements per the Zionsville subdivision control ordinance. Mr. Lance has noted that in his staff report. I would also say too, and we just kind of overlook it, but Pulte is also acquiring all of the property, and then they're going to turn around, should this plat be approved, and dedicate the right-of-way along 875 and along Whitestown Road to permit both the improvements for the roundabout and the improvements to 875. So when the town is out seeking to acquire right-of-way further south, they're not going to have to do that relative to this property. And that's tens of thousands of dollars in saved money. So again, far from being subsidized, this project is contributing to public infrastructure, not benefiting from free public infrastructure.
I think, and I just want to confirm, several people mentioned that there was no neighborhood meetings, but proper notice was made, correct?
Correct.
All right, I just wanted to confirm that. And then one person mentioned about the lift station and possible sheltering of that from their view. Do you have any comment on that?
Yes, and that's a good comment. I mean, I was talking to Brandon just before, we'd be happy to look at either sheltering it. When I look at, I think Pemberton was mentioned, they have some, I think, landscaping surrounding their lift station installations, which today, when you drive by them, they look kind of almost space age with the stainless steel and the various gauges, et cetera. They have some very clean lines. When you add the landscaping around them, they can be very well screened, and we would certainly commit to doing that as well.
Okay. I'm assuming you'd like to comment?
Thank you to Mr. Price for clarifying a few things, although there were a few that were not addressed in the comments. With regard to the schools, I want you, don't hear Kevin Schifferl, hear the voices of this community who are concerned about the growing number of rooftops and what it does to our schools. I heard Mr. Price say, well, it's not required, so we didn't do it. This community wants to know. They want to know that information. How is this going to affect? We not once heard anything about price point of these homes or how it'll affect schools, and I think that's important. We heard about drainage and how this is going to improve. My question that I asked, the rhetorical question I asked, I was hoping for an answer to is, unless I hear something different, my understanding is there's been no easements acquired for this drainage. I didn't hear Mr. Price come to you and say, we've got this all worked out and it's going to not affect this young lady's property over here with her 4 kids. And so I therefore have to assume, and Matt, I'll stand corrected on this, if you can commit to this board right now that you've outlined and already acquired those easements. I don't think that's been done.
I can address that.
But I don't think it's been done. Is that
true?
I'll address it.
Okay, well, I think we,
Time to address it.
I'm looking for a yes or no. Is there or not an easement required? Because why would you approve something until we know what's going to happen? That's the point I'm trying to make, folks. I heard something about wastewater and how this is not subsidizing. It is. And let's be clear, Mr. Price was president of our town council, and he said, I don't know of anywhere else that's been brought into our town that doesn't have these sewers. Sycamore Bend, which is immediately to the west of this, consists of, I think, nearly some, east of this, which I think consists of some nearly 100 plus homes, which have been part of this community for nearly 50 years, doesn't have sewers. Our town, for whatever reason, has determined not to run sewers there for people to access, but yet our same town is now supporting an out-of-town private developer to come in, to put money up, not the developer's money, but their money, to be paid back. And I do quote on this. I heard Matt say Pulte's paying for it. Are they, Matt? Because our own commissioner, Mr. Cook, said that the town would pay for it, and there'd be a payback schedule to be determined later. Well, if they're going to pay for it, pay now. If I put improvements to my house, I have to pay now. I might be lucky to get a roofer to give me 90 days credit, but I pay now. Why are we allowing someone to come in and get something that our current residents, everyone that lives in Sycamore Bend, Matt, that you served when you were elected, doesn't have that? So why are we giving it to new people, to a private developer that isn't even here yet? I do stand on that. That is, by any definition of any law school that people went to, a subsidy. I heard also, I talked about drainage, we heard about wastewater, those things were not addressed. And then the issue with regard to the notion that somehow those of us that are presently existing are seeking an encumbrance on people next to us. That's not what we're saying. And as I told Mr. DeLong, we met with him on 10/4 this year. You know, he said, well, what is it you want? I said, well, I want the same thing that my western neighbors of my subdivision have. My subdivision being Brock's Meadow, the same place that the Peters live. On the western edge of Brock's Meadow, when Pemberton was developed, they have a 66-foot setback. It accommodates for the transition that our comprehensive plan says you should have between different zoning areas, not 27 feet. What makes the 27 feet even more astounding is the notion that a private developer would come in and put a home closer to livestock than anyone who has livestock can put their own home. Which gets me to my last point. In addition to the issues of the covenants with regard to the fencing and the vinyl, we'd ask that if this isn't delayed today, that there also be a right to farm commitment under the statute of the state of Indiana that says that those who have the right to farm their land, which would include myself, the Lions, all the people that have R1.
Mr. Scherfel, how many acres do you have?
Continue that. We have 7 acres.
So you're not really a farm?
No, Mr. Jones, that's interesting. As Mr. DeLong, I'm sure, will acknowledge to you, we have the right to farm. We are not a farm under the definition of farm. You are correct about that. But that
you can
doesn't
plant whatever you would like. But that's
Correct.
not, you do not make your living as a farmer.
No one's saying that.
I just want to clarify that because that's a
nor
different.
does anyone that I know of that has horses on Hunt Club Road. None of these people are farmers. We're not raising rock. That's not the issue. The issue is, I'm sure Mr. DeLong will make clear, is that everyone that lives in R1 has a right to farm their land. It's in our code. I can show you it if you don't believe it. I'm sure he can point it out as well.
Once again, your parcel doesn't really qualify as a farm because it's not 20 acres or larger.
Mr. Parks, apparently you've made up your mind on an issue. I'd ask you to please listen to Mr. DeLong on this. We have a right, as he confirmed, to farm. I can show you the chart if you haven't reviewed it yourself. It is true we are not a farm because we don't make money off of our property.
No, our definition of a farm is 20 acres or larger. You're calling yourself as a farm because it's kind of a hobby.
You are correct. I am not a farm under the definition of the statute. I am a farm, just like I can farm my land, just like Mr. Lyons can have a shooting range on his land. Those are permitted rights, and that's the use that has to be taken into account.
Correct. You can plant sunflowers or corn or beans.
Which is the use that was taken into account when this body approved Pemberton with a 66-foot
setback at its smallest dimension, by the way. I think it's actually larger if you look at the maps than that, but certainly not 27 feet. And so for those reasons, the things that remain unaddressed, the drainage, the sewer, the schools, as well as the issue with regard to the right to farm, we ask that this minimally be delayed, if not denied tonight. And if the petitioner has an opportunity to get up and make comments after this, we'd ask for the same right.
All right, we've already gone back and forth twice, which is what our rules call for. So at this point in time, I'm going to close public comment for right now. Depending on what happens, it may reopen next month. So Wayne, do you have a report, please?
Thank you. Yes, staff has prepared a report on the development plan and the preliminary plat. These are two separate and distinct petitions for review and consideration and discussion this evening. Specific to the development plan, staff is supportive of the petition as articulated in the staff report. We do talk about three different recommendations related to items that have been previously mentioned by the petitioner. Certainly are supportive of the additional commitments as proposed, including the right to farm, the uniform fencing, and the very specific language about no vinyl. With the process itself, certainly as indicated, there is a requirement per the plan, per your zoning ordinance, that the building commissioner, which is myself, conduct a meeting with the petitioner to review two sets of plans. One, the first set of plan sheets is your typical grid pattern. The second set of plan sheets is the open space plan. And certainly as indicated this evening, that meeting was conducted on August 6th. Staff is fairly familiar with this property, and probably that familiarity runs right into staff's notes that it made at its meeting, findings, if you will, related to the project and its compliance with the open space requirements that are listed A through H in the ordinance, and is listed A through H in your staff report. Certainly in that petition review, the main items that jumped out at staff were the location and relationship of certain amenities to the western property line, the view shed that included, as well as confirmation of materials that would be utilized, again, with the view and particularly focused on that comment in mind. But certainly the petitioner indicated in that meeting that the project would be utilizing features that we were familiar with here in the community, specifically in Hidden Pines. Staff specifically talked about the number of windows per elevations, referencing a subdivision that is on Hazeldale Road in Hamilton County that Pulte is constructing. I can't think of the name offhand, but certainly noting the number of windows that you do see in that particular project, and also noting in Hidden Pines that there are homes with monolithic walls. Not that monolithic walls are a negative, if you will. However, in working to complement the view shed and the view to and from and in the neighborhood, staff would encourage, and the petitioner has complied with that concept as indicated in Exhibit 8, which is your conceptual building elevations, which include side and rear of additional windows. With that in mind, as staff move forward with the project, making notes about it's ready to be filed, if you will, certainly petitioners, and certainly as Mr. Schifferl indicated, we did meet on October 4th, and for an hour and a half we discussed the various components of the project, the filing, the metrics, the threshold to get to the filing, and that meeting in particular was attended by one of your Plan Commission attorneys, Dan Taylor. And ultimately, that meeting concluded with the concept of the filing occurred. The building commissioner, planning director made that decision, and the petition did move forward. Certainly, and as in speaking with now Deputy Mayor Ed Mitro, who at one time was the planning director, we spoke about how the building commissioner reduced their findings to writing in the staff report. So certainly the findings that I prepared on August 6th have now been reduced and formalized, again, A through H in the staff report, speaking to each item that needs to be reviewed by the building commissioner, which it was reviewed as well on August 6th. Again, staff is supportive of the petition. We've touched upon the open space review, the rear elevations, the covenants are available, they are on file, and I do want to note, certainly the right to farm is an excellent point. Mr. Jones is 100% correct. The definition of a farm, as you're well familiar with, as many discussions that are had at the BZA specific to that topic, but in R1, a party is permitted by right to farm, to have a recreational private stable, if you will, or as well, but those agricultural activities are permitted. And as far as the noise ordinance, recreational discharge of firearms is also permitted as well, again, in the rural district. Again, staff is supportive of the development petition, subject to the staff report and findings. Specific to the Plan Commission filing on the plat, again, staff is supportive of that petition as well. I do want to note that we're looking for a few cut sheets related to some information on some streetlights, and I do note that the signage as proposed, the entry signage, I believe is currently 2 feet above the permitted height, but certainly those are all items that can be addressed as the project moves forward. Again, staff is supportive of the plat petition as filed, and I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, let me touch on a thing real quick. Can you talk about the lift station and the payment by the utility?
Certainly. Certainly the utility is funded by ratepayers. It's not something I'm 100% familiar with in my department, but I do speak with Barry quite often. The town, I would say, has had a variety of ways through history that it's entertained different development schemes and payments, if you will. I mean, Rockbridge and Cobblestone, the developer of that particular project developed the project, installed their sewers, and then charged the town on a monthly basis for access to those sewers above and beyond what the utility hook-on fee. And this fee that the town paid finally ended, I would say, about 2 years ago. But it was something that was one type of arrangement that was entered into. I want to say Irishman's Run had a separate agreement with the town that actually the individual ratepayers in that neighborhood paid an additional fee on top of their monthly sewer fee until that debt was exhausted, and I believe that program has ended. Hampshire, they are reimbursing the sewer utility per section. I believe it's $53,000 in payment due with each sections 1 through 4. And then the Enclave is an example where the utility just simply undersized it and didn't plan ahead. And so now these are different ways that the town has worked through those conversations throughout the years. In more recent times, Hampshire being an example of that time where a payment is advanced through a certain scenario. In this case, I think it's $53,000 every section just to reimburse the sewer utility. That's the details that I have. I believe you have some specific comments from Barry Cook on this topic as well in your packets in front of you.
But the utility is a separate entity, a separate legal entity, correct? I mean, so the sewer utility itself is making the decision to pay for that.
Correct. It's the sewer utility that chooses how it runs its operation through its budget.
And I want a question for Matt along these same lines of what we're talking about. If what I heard you explain, the lift station and related work being put in is actually going to be larger than what is needed by this subdivision.
That's correct.
And then what will happen is this subdivision then will pay for their proportionate share of that.
Correct.
And since the system that is being designed will be actually oversized to pick up additional areas, they're actually going to pay a larger proportionate share than if they had just paid for a system that serviced only their needs. Then in the future, whatever other developments attach themselves to this lift station, they will pay the balance of that proportionate share when that comes due or when that work happens.
That's right.
Hence the need for the town or the utility to pay up front for the system, because they are the ones that will then collect the proportionate share in the future. And to request a private developer to do that just makes for lousy math.
That's right, and to ask the private developer to pay for more than their pro rata share would be discriminatory under the annexation laws. And so that's why they don't do it. And the math doesn't work. So what we get to do is pay twice. You get to pay for the line going north and then also pay for the regional lift station. I interpreted Barry Cook, who's the sewer superintendent's comment about the town paying for it, to really be saying that they were going to be doing the work and incurring bills and would therefore pay for it, but the developer would be immediately reimbursing. We would be paying like a pass-through for our review fees from BLN and for other fees that the developer is subject to. That's the way we interpret it. We never interpreted it to mean the town was paying for it or financing it.
While you're there, can you further speak to the drainage and easements, and you seem to have an interest in talking about that?
Yes. So there is a need to either establish or acquire off-site easements for a stormwater outlet, meaning a place for the stormwater to ultimately be released to that's off-site. Now, there's also a need for easements relating to the connection up to the sewer line that are off-site. And so it is very common, in fact, virtually every case that I've either witnessed or been involved with is that you need to have an approved project before you have any basis to go out and acquire easements. And so projects like on Zionsville Road, like the Cove, like Cobblestone originally, like Rockbridge originally, all of them involved some off-site infrastructure, but that was always done post-approval. Otherwise, you are putting the cart before the horse. You're acquiring property interests for which you may not have any use for them.
And your earlier comments related to the drainage was that in all likelihood, you are going to improve off-site drainage from where it is today.
Yeah. And I would say more than a likelihood. I mean, it's a mathematical, calculated certainty that having the ability to collect and release the collected stormwater over time, rather than what happens today, which is that the one lady mentioned being able to have the gully washer, right? That's what's happening today because there is nothing holding the stormwater back. And so once that's established, that improves the drainage.
And to keep going down this line, you know, one of the things that showed up when we were doing Holiday Farms is that within our PUDs that they had requested initially, Holiday Farms, as well as the one we approved for the farm, had relief from the town of Zionsville drainage standards. So I spent some time talking to, and I should know his name, who oversees our Zionsville drainage, and also compared it to Westfield. It has a very stringent drainage plan. Bottom line is the drainage plan the town of Zionsville has is very stringent. It should benefit the people downstream from this. They are not asking for any relief from it. We'll need to follow it. And then, like Matt is saying, until a subdivision is approved and they can then confirm and quantify their offlow, they don't know how much or where the easement needs to go. So you can't do it until you have the project. And this last statement, while I'm at it, regarding the water. So water systems are looped. They don't really flow from one direction to the other. They are pressurized. So if Cobblestone is having water pressures issues, the addition of other developments around it will then kind of pursue or force the water company, the utility providing it, to upgrade their system, which benefits all. It's most people assume water's flowing in one direction in a pipe. It's really not. It's kind of static and under pressure. So once again, what this is proposing to do may fill a void in the utility services for this general area, thus benefiting Cobblestone.
I mean, does anybody else have questions?
I do. I'm still concerned about the impact on the schools. And since you didn't do a study, was one done for Hidden Pines? Because I keep hearing the quality of the homes being compared to Hidden Pines. Is it much bigger?
I'm not aware if one was done or not. Okay. But what I meant to say when I was up here before about that issue is, I apologize if I came across flip about not being a triggering event for the school study. But what judgment was made, and it was made by the elected officials in this town at the time, was to establish the density for this property by the zoning process that was followed. And there was a public hearing, there was testimony, there was a vote. It was a close vote, but it was rezoned. And that process establishes what's being built here now. And that's why we don't typically do, in my experience, a fiscal study for when the town's already determined what's going there in terms of the actual improvements.
So I guess it's been mentioned a few times. What is the anticipated price point of these homes?
Scott, you want to? This is Scott Marin.
Scott Marin, Division President, Pulte Homes of Indiana, 11590 North Meridian Street, Carmel. The anticipated price point would be consistent with Hidden Pines, which today is about mid 400s to almost $600,000.
And to even answer that question, so Scott Robinson was at a Rotary meeting the other day. They are actually putting together more or less a table or a chart to actually sort of show us at what point, enterprise point of a home, it starts to become a negative, as well as give us a little more information as to when a development is put in and they spec the size of the houses and the number of bedrooms, what the true anticipated load is going to be. I think we've mentioned it over and over again. One of the current problems we have with our system is, one, we don't really ask for a school impact study until it's a rezoning or something is changing. And then two, the developer's allowed to kind of fill it out, and the school does not approve or deny it. So what the school's working at doing is giving us a better source of information, but the school will never put themselves in a position of approving or denying subdivisions and their impact on the schools. So.
Keep going, if you have more.
So another comment that was made that I do agree with is that intersection with 550 and 875, there are a lot of cars that come down 550. I mean, that's how everybody goes to the soccer field and comes back. And if you go up and down that road enough, I think that intersection is going to be an issue, especially when the connector road comes through there. I think some thought needs to be put into that lift station, regional lift station in that area. Is there enough room? And I guess the comment was made about how everything got pushed back away from the roads because that's part of the open space standards. But I mean, to a certain extent, looking at that area, you're kind of wasting a lot of the buffering against the roads, it seems, as opposed, and it's pushing it back up into that corner. I don't know if that issue's set in stone or not, but especially that corner, the way that it's drawn right now with the pond and the lift station right there, it doesn't really seem to leave any opportunity for intersection improvements to help deal with left-hand turns off of that road and stacking and dealing with Mr. Schmidt's driveway. So I don't know exactly when the appropriate time would be to deal with that, but the way it's drawn right now doesn't seem to be a good way to make that work.
And so what we were asked to do as part of the review process was to, and part of the comments that we received during previous, kind of review and vetting publicly of the land plan associated with the fields, was to eliminate that access point. Don't exacerbate anything. Eliminating the access point off of 550. We do have to make certain perimeter road improvements with regard to, that's by ordinance as far as perimeter road improvements. That is something that Lance, the street superintendent, typically works with the petitioner as you go through the secondary platting process as to the timing and the nature, further delineation of the nature of those improvements. So that's something that could be done as part of that secondary process. I think his staff comments, if you look at his memorandum that says we comply with the perimeter road standards, he mentions in there that he is anticipating working with the petitioner going forward as he's done with other like developments in that vicinity as far as the improvements that are made to the perimeter roads. The lift station location is something we were basically told that's where it needed to go, and so we followed, those instructions based on the town's engineering review. But we certainly do anticipate additional work with the street department as far as road improvements.
Any other questions, comments? I do have a question, one last question related to lot depth. He keeps talking that it's less than 100 feet from his horse barn to a house. Is that true? Where will the house sit relative to, I'm just kind of curious.
Brandon, can you come up and speak to that as far as the actual orientation of the home on the lot?
I'm seeing this 27-foot setback from the front line, and the house is going to be, I'm just. Because the house is going to come to here. This is 27.
So the rear setback on the lot is 15 feet, and then the common buffer area is between 27 and I believe it gets up to 30 feet.
Okay, so, all right. What's the depth of those?
And the front setback, by the way, is 35 feet,
Okay, 35.
which is common.
What's the depth of the whole lot? I'm just curious, what is that?
Those are 145
Okay,
on average.
all right.
And then the average depth of the house is going to be what?
They're between 60 and 70 feet. I'm sorry, 40 to 60 feet. Sorry.
Basically, you've got a 145-foot lot. The back of the house could be as far back as 95 feet off the front, which leaves you 50 feet, plus how much of a buffer do you have back?
27 foot to 30 foot.
So 50 plus 77, and then whatever Kevin's got on his property. So he's as close to 100 feet as he can get.
No. Can I address the I think
It's close.
my engineer wife has done all these calculations, but the setback is 27 feet, or the buffer's 27 feet. Then the setback is 15, so that's 42 feet from our property line to the back of the house.
To the buildable lot.
To the back
of the lot.
Right, but, the house is going to sit 40 feet from that.
No. I thought we said 15 feet was the building setback.
That's what you could build to.
Math is math. We'll agree on the math, right? When it's all done.
So you got so you have a front setback of 35 feet.
35.
Okay, let's just say the average depth is what? Go ahead. Go ahead. Okay. Okay, so you have 135 feet is the full lot depth? Okay. You have a 35-foot front setback. You have 85 feet from that setback to the rear setback line to build a house.
Right.
Our houses on average are between 40 and 60 feet deep. So there's going to be 25-ish feet.
So it's 50, yeah. You're, all right. Well, and the key, one of the key things here is as you emphasized at the very beginning, Matt, you're not asking for anything. You're building completely to the ordinances.
But the ordinance is also 100 feet from the barn.
In transition lots.
I'll leave, Matt and Wayne have worked out the particulars on the ordinances, so. All right. Any other questions, comments? So we got a few options to us. Anybody want to make a motion?
I'll make a motion. I move that docket number 2018-44-PP petition for primary plat approval to allow for an open space subdivision to provide for 78 lots in the RSF2 residential single-family zoning district be approved based on the findings of fact as presented.
Is there a second?
Before we-
Hold on, wait. We have to do the development plan first. So strike that motion.
And staff would draw your attention to your responsibility of, you actually have two sets of findings to articulate this evening specific to your development plan approval process. First and foremost is the 4 points as listed in the ordinance A through D, which speaks to the Plan Commission's responsibility to approve a development plan indicating compliance with sections 194.25 through 194.28 upon findings, again, A through D. Your second responsibility related to the development plan process specific to findings is looking at the petitioner. We back up a set. The petitioner typically prepares a set of findings for your review. If you agree with the petitioner's submitted set of findings, simply your motion this evening would incorporate those findings for your reference. As the hearing has occurred, and it sounds like you're moving forward related to considering articulating findings and a motion. In front of you this evening is a set of draft findings, A through D, and staff would offer that these findings need to be reflective of the inclusion of the reference to the cement fibrous siding, i.e. lack of vinyl, as well as inclusive to referencing the proposed commitments as articulated this evening.
All right. So we need to add an E for no vinyl.
You have two separate and distinct responsibilities specific to findings. First and foremost is the Plan Commissioner's responsibility with a separate set of findings that's in front of you, draft by staff, items entitled A through D. But I'm just, for the record, referencing these findings, but making sure they're inclusive of the terms cement fibrous siding and inclusive of the petitioner's proposed commitments as referenced this evening. So for example, in C, cement fibrous siding could be added after the words multiple roof planes and before overhangs. And in D, in the third line after the word filing, you could insert comma inclusive of the proposed commitments and before the word and.
Do I need to read all this in here?
Just say inclusive of the words.
Inclusive of.
Like he just said.
We'll get it done.
I forget the cement fiber siding.
That's cement fiber siding.
Then, yeah, the fibrous cement, was it fibrous and cement siding?
Cement fibrous siding.
Cement fibrous siding.
Proposed commitments. Discussed.
Kevin, Mr. Schifferl mentioned one other item too, in addition to the two that Wayne mentioned, the uniform fencing commitment we made as well.
Can you add that?
Yes.
Add that under
proposed commitments. So what we want to do is cite the Plan Commission findings and then note that there's been additions. Does that save us from reading the whole thing?
Right.
And then this gets attached to the petition number 2018-45DP.
Correct.
Okay. Want to try this? All right. I move that docket number 2018-45-DP development plan petition of an open space subdivision to provide for the development of a 58.459 acre site into 78 lots for the residential use in the RSF2 residential single family zoning district as per section 194.047E of the zoning ordinance be approved with the conditions noted in the staff report and based upon the findings as noted in the Plan Commission findings listed A through D, with the following changes. To paragraph C, we add after roof planes and overhangs, the uniform fencing requirement and also the use of cement fiber siding on all four sides of the structure. And that we also modify paragraph D after the petitioner's filing to state that we will be inclusive of the proposed commitments discussed this evening.
Is there a second?
Second.
Mr. President?
Yes.
I request a roll call vote, please.
Okay.
Provided that I do want to make sure that this motion includes not only this findings, but the other 7 that are mentioned in your staff report that's exhibit.
Okay, so you need to modify your motion to include the additional 7 findings in the
Staff report as Exhibit 11.
As Exhibit 11.
So moved.
And does the second accept that?
Yes.
All right. So we have a motion and a second, and we've had a call for a roll call vote.
Mr. Franz?
Aye.
Ms. Grabanowski?
No.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Ms. Walker?
Yes.
Mr. Reinbold?
Mr. President, I ask to have my name moved to the end of the roll call, please.
All right.
Mr. Lewis?
Aye.
Mr. Reinbold?
No.
All right, so that makes the vote 4-2. It passes. So now we have a motion on the 44, which is the primary plat.
Do we need to make any revisions to that, Wayne?
I think we're good with the structure of the staff report and recommendations as written.
Okay. Then I'll move the docket number 2018-44-PP petition for primary plat approval to allow for an open space subdivision to provide for 78 lots in the RSF2 residential single-family zoning district be approved based on the findings of fact as presented.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second, and let's go ahead and do the roll call vote again with Mr. Reinbold last.
Mr. Franz?
Aye.
Ms. Grabanowski?
No.
Mr. Jones?
Aye.
Ms. Walker?
Aye.
Mr. Lewis?
Aye.
Mr. Reinbold?
No.
Again, vote of 4-2, so the motion passes. With that, that's the end of the
Thank you, Mr. President.
open business. So we have one other item on the docket. Is that correct?
Correct, you have other business.
So we have other business, docket number 2018-16 DP Seek LLC, 1120 West Oak Street. Discussion and clarification, administrative approval of a minor amendment of the development plan regarding the site plan and elevations. Can we have everybody please vacate so we can finish this off?
I kind of spread out, don't I?
All right. So what we have is Wayne has received a request from Dave Roush on some modifications to the building that would be sitting just out in front of us here. Wayne, would you care to discuss it?
Certainly what's in front of you this evening is staff's responsibility to bring to you any changes that did occur through a issuance of a building permit. And what is presented to you this evening are, in fact, what is defined by your ordinance as minor modifications to the project. Specifically, there's been some changes to the elevations, front and side, the side facing to Starbucks, and well as moving the building forward 5 feet. Specific to moving the building forward 5 feet, it's still not in front of Starbucks. It's actually now in line with the porch structure. As far as the elevations are concerned, staff has spent a number of months, I believe almost a year, working with the petitioner related to the project. The addition of the metal panels that the Plan Commission saw at the public hearing was a newer component that was unknown to staff, but certainly it was supportable. However, we did have the luxury of reviewing the project throughout its evolution, and it was always a fully masonry structure. The panels themselves were added by the petitioner as actually a cost element, with the belief that while they added to the structure, they would potentially have the ability to manage the cost of the masonry a little bit more with the addition of the metal panels. That did not happen during the bidding process for their project, and staff just happens to be aware of this just anecdotally, but certainly, all of this different background information then leads the petitioner to actually submit a full masonry building for the building permit review. As the project still conformed to the minor changes, the staff felt obligated and supportive of issuing the building permit, knowing full well and informing the petitioner that this causes this discussion with the Plan Commission, and the Plan Commission has ultimate jurisdiction over this change. Now, the basis of these conversations with ourselves when we're having this type of discussion is to take a step back and analyze if the Plan Commission had solely and only seen a fully masonry building, would the Plan Commission have requested modifications to the facade to articulate it or make it more higher interest, or different bends to the facade? And staff came to the conclusion that if it would have been submitted a full masonry building to begin with, staff would have been recommending approval of that project at that time. So that's sort of the basis and the background for that. But at the same time, what you saw was a more interesting facade with different materials, different finishes, and that's what's up for discussion. And I would note, sorry, being a little talkative, I guess, before we dive into that, I would note these actions are very and ultimately administrative in nature. The petitioner doesn't typically attend these meetings to have this type of discussion. Again, it's at their risk. So we have no petitioner here this evening to speak to any challenges or concerns with the changes. Certainly they can make themselves available at a future meeting, but I do want to point out the petitioner was not, I believe, in the gears of being here this evening.
Okay. Is there any comments?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. To a certain extent, I would be supportive of Wayne using his local knowledge and experience to help guide prospective tenants or people bringing their business to Zionsville to make it more financially viable for them. But on the other hand, I'm a little concerned that he's overstepping his bounds when he gets into some of the comments he just made about whether they had brought a metal paneled sided building or a masonry building. my background, like I said, is historic preservation, where I'm used to being taken to task for the color of my bricks and the color of my mortar and how thick my limestone's going to be. And so I kind of apply the same eye to anything that comes in front of me. This project, from my standpoint, is kind of a keystone piece for the town of Zionsville. It's our front door to something that the town councilors and all of us have taken a certain amount of heat over the development of this building. So here we have our preeminent parcel that we've put out there, and in fact, the land on the other side of our access drive we're kind of sitting on, hoping there's adjoining property that comes available for something even more interesting and viable and beneficiary to the town. So when I see something like this, and in the meeting where this was approved, I took Dave Roush to task because some of his renderings weren't matching up with his elevations about, what are you doing? And so I received confirmation that what we were going to get is what we approved. And I am not supportive at all of this architectural downgrading of this structure. I don't think, this is, to me, at this level, the big boy club. You walk into this room when you've got a commercial structure of this nature and this value and this design, and you present what you're going to build. This isn't somebody's house where, geez, Bill lost his job, so we can't do the, chimney like we wanted to, and we kind of let that go. And so I'm substantially disappointed that I am looking at something that isn't what it is. And then even in the sheets that he provided us, he still ain't got it right. The renderings still don't match the elevations. So at a certain point, I know what my vote is going to be, and the rest of the commission can decide, can people come to Zionsville, do whatever they damn well please, or are we going to set a set of standards and keep them? And, we took the Dairy Queen to task for what they look like, and I think we got a better looking Dairy Queen. I got a little miffed at Lids because they did a little bit of the same thing. Their renderings were much more detailed than what they built. So for me, it's important. I think it's important to the community as that it provides a look. This backside, while, it's just facing Starbucks, when you come down Main Street, that's what you're going to see. You're going to see all four sides of this building in perpetuity. And if it's just another block building, then we might as well have done a two-story pole barn and call it a day. So other than that, I don't have any real opinion about it, but, that's just me.
Well, and as staff, certainly Larry and I have talked about this previously, and I'm not shy at all of having constructive criticism. I encourage it. And certainly your staff needs to make sure it understands its parameters. We give a lot of counsel to our applicants, to our customers, to our clients. However, at the end of the day, we're staff. They're making the final decisions. And certainly Lids was a very strong example, and some of you were not here for that petition, where a building was proposed and the building that was submitted for permits was radically different, and that they were forced to come back to the Plan Commission and work through those differences. Staff came to a different conclusion with this one because of the minor nature, but still, regardless, reporting to you this evening as we're required to do. So at a minimum, certainly the Plan Commission can take a vote, certainly can continue this discussion to a different day to allow the petitioner to come in to hear firsthand concerns and comments.
And I brought what we approved in case anybody wants to see it.
No, I initially was thinking, okay, but after listening to you, I think you make some valid points. And when you take a look at what they've got, it's a significant change in appearance.
That it would be all metal. And then here they've got a metal corner on here, which is what they have still shown back there. There's also a carpet detail here that's kind of gone away.
So how do you want to deal with this? Do you want to you want to give them an opportunity to speak next month?
Let's pull his permit, give away the land. Sorry. Are these on? Sorry.
Yes.
Been a long night. My bad. I'm open to another suggestion, though.
But do you want to continue it and discuss it with him next month?
Yeah, I'd be all favor. I would make a motion that we continue this till next month and give them notice that there is some concern.
Second.
All right, all in favor signify by aye.
Aye.
Opposed by nay. Hey, we had one that went 6-0. Just kidding. All right, yeah. Is there a motion to adjourn? Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor, aye. We're done.
And thank you.
I will sit there and, you know, when you hear these things, I don't want to shut it down.
I said 9:45.
They can, you know, we probably really should suspend rules when they get going that far, but. Right.
And the one out.
I mean, you know, the thing about shit.
Are going to be adjoining property. Why do we have?
Because like when you go to the 400, the reason they're back that far is because there's a big drainage easement that runs through the illegal drainage. It comes around the back, so then they're back on the other side.
We can ask Wayne, why do we have such a deep setback?
Because our ordinance is
And I do.
written